Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Doctors of Running Virtual Roundtable, where we, three doctors of physical therapy, discuss the art and the science to the stuff that we're putting on our feet. Today, we are going to be talking about the Newton Fate 6. However, this is a really exciting day. It's our first time that we are having a guest on with us, but it's not just one guest or two guests. We have three guests with us from Newton Running Company. And so we're just going to start by having them introduce themselves. Give us your name, how you got started with Newton, what's your role now?
Hi, my name is Jerry Lee. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Newton.
How long ago did you guys found Newton?
Newton was founded in 2007.
And what was your inspiration to start up a new company?
Oh,
that's probably a huge question.
That's a long story, because the whole love affair with this technology started in the middle of the 90s. And it took us a long time, 12 years to get to them. But I was a passionate runner, believed in, run a lot of marathons. And when I became aware of the technology, I believed what it was going to do and how it could change runners' ability to run longer, whether that's longer in distance or longer in age.
Fabulous. Thank you. Who's next?
I'm Matt Lee. I'm head of operations at Newton. I kind of straddle several different roles, everything from logistics to planning and analysis, as well as into product and development. Kind of touch a lot of different areas. Get the good fortune of working with all the different people very closely within the organization. So kind of a multidisciplinary approach. I've been with Newton for roughly, I'm guessing, about 12 years. Came on about a year or two after the initial founding. I had spent a lot of time in graduate school and had been pursuing a political career, and saw Newton kind of kick off and just start to get their feet wet, and it really looked like an amazing experience. And so decided, hey, maybe I'll take a little break and get involved in the shoe business, and ever since then, that's where I've been.
Fabulous. All right, and last but not least, Laura, you want to go next?
Yep, I'm Laura Tingle. I've been at Newton for 10 years. I'm the marketing manager. Previously, I was the marketing manager, and I started my first 2 years at Newton. I did retail sales support. So I've kind of taken a little journey to get to the product side, but yeah, it's been great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all again for joining us. We'll be running through the general specs that are within the Newton Fate 6. And then as we keep going, we'll hopefully, you guys are the experts in the shoe more so than we are. We just have our testing miles in them. So please, if we say anything that's not 100% accurate, just jump in and, let us know. Let us know, and we'll move forward with that. And then we have some questions for you guys to hopefully let our followers and our listeners know a little bit more about kind of what went into the creation of the update to the shoe. There's some new components that we'll talk about. But let me just start with some specs. So the Newton Fate 6, I'm assuming this is in a size 9. The weight for that is 9.2 ounces. It comes in, for those of you who are only listening on podcasts, these shoes are red, and for all three of us who've been testing them, when we wear them in the clinic, we all work as PTs. Our patients always are like, "Whoa, what's that shoe that you're wearing? It looks really sharp." They've done a good job with it. This is one of their neutral training shoes, and kind of posed as a really good shoe as an introduction to the line. And let's kind of continue on here. When you look at the upper of the shoe, you're looking at an engineered mesh, air mesh you can kind of see a couple different layers within it. It has some overlays over the top, and then I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the tongue is reflective, as well as the side decal of the Newton logo. Those both are reflective in nature, which is a pretty neat little kind of add-on. You have a tongue that is attached to the shoe itself, so it's not just free floating. It's attached to the upper. And then when we go into the midsole, there's a lot going on. If you haven't ran a Newton before, you do have the 4-foot lugs, but now you also have more full foot cushioning. So from the rear foot all the way up to the 4-foot, you're going to have cushioning systems. You have a new foam compound that we'll talk about, maybe get some details on from the Newton team in the rear foot. And then you have some new systems going on in the front and some action-reaction system stuff here. So that's the general breakdown of the shoe. But before we go into kind of what we thought is running, what's your vision with the Fate 6 Newton team? Kind of what did you want this shoe? Who did you create it for? What's your vision with it?
Well, I'll turn most of it over to Laura and Matt, but we always felt it wasn't so much the beginning runner, although it works for them, but it's also that everyday runner who's not looking for PRs, but looking for comfort, looking to avoid injuries, and to have their legs not feel fatigued after they're done. So the updates are exciting, and with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and Matt to kind of go through the technical side of what we changed.
Yeah, one of the beauties, I really like the way you phrased it to begin with, in that, it's the Fate is really ultimately intended to be a great introduction to the brand. It's definitely, it can work for entry-level runners, but more so it's to design a good, easy access point. As you guys are probably aware of with our technology, it feels a little bit different than your standard shoe. It's because, you have our patented action-reaction technology in there. And basically, that involves a whole lot of material dynamics, elastics and other things like that, moving in and out, interacting with foam, interacting with embedded plates. There's actually, I think there's roughly 11 or 13 separate material layers in that shoe between your foot and the ground. And so, the Fate has been around for a little while. We believe firmly in the concept of evolution, and the shoe has continued to evolve. This year is kind of our grandest Fate. It's gender tuned, which is something I'll let Laura speak to a little bit more. It has a very, very round and accessible action-reaction technology package that provides a versatile platform that, has great energy absorption, other things like that. But it's also something you can really get up on and really put some speed work in. Some of our best runners prefer the Fate line over some of our more performance-oriented stuff.
Yeah, great. Before we jump over to Laura with the gender-specific stuff, can you speak a little bit to the design of the action-reaction technology and kind of where you see that in the shoe?
Sure. It's a really, really long evolution throughout the history of Newton. It's the idea that, Jerry spoke of having 12 years before we ever even made it to market. So it's seen many different incarnations. But what it is it really, I kind of like to phrase it as ultimately a material dynamics story. It's a mechanism, it's an active technology that essentially functions very similar to perhaps some people would use a trampoline as an example. Some people would use a shock absorber. Some people would use a piston. The lugs on the bottom move in and out of the midsole, and what they do is they provide some level of energy absorption there, but then they're also tensioned, and they create a sense of return. And the combination of refining that technology, the piston-like technology, over the years, what it also does is it also helps increase biomechanical positioning, other things like that, in conjunction with a lower drop shoe to really try to get you into a good, solid, healthy midfoot running position.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Those who haven't tried Newton running shoes before, there is something very special about picking up the pace really quick and getting up on your toes. It's very fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Laura, you want to tell us a little bit about how the update with creating this to have some gender-specific components?
Yep. So the Fate 6 is our first women's-specific shoe. But when we set out to make a women's-specific shoe, we didn't want to just change the fit of the shoe. We wanted to change the technology in the shoe to be gender-specific as well. We did a fair bit of third-party testing, and we found, for the most part, the force created when you run is a byproduct of your body weight and your pace. So we're finding that some women weren't actually engaging our technology. They're just running on top of it because they're either too light or maybe their pace wasn't engaging enough. And so we did change the fit of the shoe. We have a women's specific glass now. We also have a women's specific pattern to better fit the anatomy of a woman's foot. But we also thinned some of the plates in the shoe to make it more accessible to women to be able to really engage that technology. And so far the feedback has been phenomenal. So I think the years that went into making millimeter changes was worth it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I feel like most of the time when we hear, I think Matt, you put out an article on gender-specific changes within foot anatomy and morphology, but I think it's rare to see the changes in the actual technology in the shoe between genders. Matt, do you have anything to add into that?
For those listening who aren't aware of this, in the running industry, having men's and women's specific lasts or shape for shoes is actually quite rare, especially among bigger companies as well, because it's been very unfortunate as somebody who, you know, has a fiance who's a professional marathoner and is always trying to help her get the right fit. Men and women have very different biomechanics, and they have very different feet and extremities. And it's very important that companies recognize those differences, right? So when it comes to optimizing performance and optimizing health, it's awesome to hear that you guys are going and doing like women specific stuff. And it is hard, right? It's very hard because you're basically creating two totally separate shoes. So that additional costs in terms of creating separate lasts. And I just, from a friend of mine who does biomechanical testing, just found out how much it can cost to create a separate last for a shoe. And it blew my mind. I was like, oh, it's expensive, but I think it's well worth it for being very unique in this industry to go, hey, we have a women's specific last, just like we have a men's specific last, because previously what most companies did, which is called shrink it and pink it, where they would take a men's shoe and make it smaller and put women's colors on it and call it a women's shoe. And in actuality, right, there's different feet. There are plenty of people who can switch between shoes. I have many patients who are both male and female who go back and forth and are still successful based on the width of their foot or their own personal mechanics and trying to figure that out. But it is super exciting to hear you guys are creating a women's specific shoe. And I commend you because I'm only beginning to understand how much extra work that takes. So good on you guys. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's two other pieces that I believe are new in this shoe. At least one for sure. I believe that I saw that the new Newtonian foam cushioning in the heel is new. Is the XPS diffusion plate also new in this shoe? Is it debuting in this one as well?
Yes.
When Newton started, we had a plate in our shoe from the very beginning. And even though plates had been around for years, no one ever used them. But we did it to start stabilizing the foot. And as time grew on, we learned the larger that plate gets extended, the more stability it provides the runner. It starts taking care of issues like pronation, supination, and so forth. So the idea behind the plate was to extend it. And when somebody lands, this plate, rather than have a floppy EVA in there, we have a firmer plate that allows your foot to settle down and land more firmly on the ground and so forth. So, but it took a lot of effort to get there, figure out what materials, exactly how far back it goes, how firm, how light, and so forth. And as Laura indicated, for the females, we took our membrane and softened it up. So the membrane under the forefoot, even though it has an extended plate, allows for them, when they're engaging the technology, to have a smoother ride and also to drive those lugs up into the chamber so they get more cushioning and they get more performance.
Wonderful. And is that diffusion plate, the plate that you've put in, is it denoted by the red here that spans across the forefoot, or is it within the midsole, one of those 11 to 13 layers that we can't see?
It's within. The red you see is the membrane. And
Okay.
membrane, so if you turn the shoe all the way over, you look and you see black lugs. And okay, we covered, and that's the other thing we did is we covered up before our lugs were separate, and now we've connected them because we found if you connect them, then they have a tendency to work together in a better fashion. But if you were to strip away that black rubber, you'll see a red membrane underneath there, and that's what that red wrap ground is. But the plate starts at the tip of the black, back right there, and goes all the way back to the open area for the heel.
Wow.
Right out there.
Great. Wonderful.
And
What information do you guys have on the Newtonian foam that was put in the heel as well, and what kind of led to that transition to add something new there?
we are all super curious in that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you look closely, it almost looks bubbly. That's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, well, Newtonium is, every brand has, there's these, kind of core chemicals out there, chemical formulations for foam and other things like that. And every brand has their own proprietary version. Newtonium is one of our variants of ETPU. And so it's definitely, our own little version. Everybody kind of takes it and makes it their own, through a variety of different things. We've increase the use of it in many different regards, because it does in some ways possess, some superior absorption qualities and other things like that. But, we still want to, with our shoes, it's a little bit different than many others because we have so many materials interacting within each other. So, we really have to be tactical about where we do these things because throwing a soft in between two hards and a medium, it's going to, the introduction of different, foams and different textures like that can really interplay in our shoes quite a bit differently. So we really tactically use our Newtonium. It sits in the rear along with some additional components there to really help you get a good, nice, shock absorber effect. And then there's also a Newtonium strobel in there to bring it up closer to the foot to give you one kind of last layer of good cushioning in there closest to the foot while it's interacting with, firmer substances down below.
I have to say you guys did a great job with that. That was something I was not expecting, was how smooth the heel is. Like, obviously,
Yep.
great. But as a hefty heel striker, when I landed, I was expecting a much firmer ride, and I got this really nice bounce forward, and I went, oh, that's not EVA. That feels good. So awesome job on that. That's great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I knew that wasn't EVA. I called it.
That was the question we've just been waiting to ask. What is Newtonian foam?
Yeah.
And I think in the email, I think I called it Newtonian like 6 times. So that's my mistake. My bad.
That's all right.
David called me out every time. He's like, dude, you misspelled it again. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll get it right next time. I got to stop copying and pasting. All right. I think that this is what I'm so glad about, just in this conversation so far. There's so much going on within this midsole, which, isn't that thick. We don't have the list of the stack heights here. Do you guys have those off the top of your head? I know we didn't say this, a 4.5 millimeter drop. But do you know?
Laura?
I do. I don't have it off the top of my head, but one thing about stack heights with Newton, because the lugs do compress, we don't have uniform stack heights like other companies where the midsole is going to be the same height regardless of if it's sitting on a table or if someone's running in it. So our stack height is fluid depending on if those lugs are compressed or if, like I said, the shoe's just sitting on the table. And so we usually have a bit of disclaimer when talking stack heights because it is such a dynamic thing for us.
Because I was going to actually, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love how you use the word dynamic because we have to explain that a lot of times. That say if there's a shoe that has a 10 millimeter drop and say it's one of those softer, say racing shoes out there that once you load it and run through it, that stack height, that drop ratio can change very much. So I kind of like that idea of not having set stack measurements and relying more on the dynamic fluidity of the shoe rather than, set static measurements. So.
It is also
Yeah, because in some ways the shoe actually self-tunes in that regard as well. You know, it's kind of, you know, as Laura mentioned before and Jerry did with the gender tuning and other things like that, those materials are, you know, designed to interact, you know, within specific gender, weight, patterns, other things like that. And so, you know, the shoe to some degree can sort of self-tune itself to the user based within a certain range of parameters we kind of set per size, per model, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha.
It's interesting you guys mentioned the tuning, because that's something I noticed as the stability guy of the group. Again, shout out to you guys for sending me the Kismet and the distance. I'm so excited to test these out. So for the people who are listening on the podcast, I'm holding a bright green neon shoe that I'm very excited to test out one of the stability models. It's interesting that even in the Fate, generally I need to take some time to break a shoe in just to get my feet used to it, because I'm continually working on the stability of my foot. And I didn't have that issue at all. I was able to go right into this, and it kind of just felt like the first couple steps you're kind of feeling out the shoe, and then right after that it was like, whoa, that feels very natural. So I'm very impressed, because that is something very rare, because it felt like the shoe met me where I was at, instead of having to wait to break the thing in. So it was that I'm very impressed with that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I agree completely. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think you're good, man.
David, all you.
Oh, okay. Just to kind of allude, I believe Jerry was bringing it up earlier, that the idea of running longer, whether it be for distance or for age. And for my very first run in this, I just did 10 miles straight out the box, and it felt fine the entire way. I felt like I had like my cadence, my legs, everything falling under me. And I felt really light, very fluid. I took them off after the run, and I still felt great. And I was like, that was nice.
Yes. Beyond one of the things that we constantly talk about for both our patients and the people that are readers, and you guys talk about injuries all the time. That was one of the driving factors behind creating something that really emphasized the human body, is that one of the few, finding out what causes injuries and what doesn't is very challenging in the research world. But one of the things that we do know for sure is sudden changes the body isn't ready for. And the fact that's one of the awesome things, that again, having a shoe that tunes itself to you, but also again, having the Fate and the Kismet line to allow people to transition into this kind of footwear is awesome, right? You don't see that very often of companies going, hey, you know, we know that we do things differently, but we want you to be able to ease into this, because again, your goal is to keep people healthy. So I really, again, applaud you guys for that, because we see that a lot as physical therapists, right? Dealing with people who are injured and coming in trying to figure out what happened. And a lot of times it's like, hey, you did too much too soon. And shoes are also one of those areas. So it's great to see you guys really focusing and going, ease into this, but also let's have a shoe that kind of helps you with that transition. So slightly off topic, but I thought really
Thank you. Yeah. Matt or David, do you guys have any other questions for the Newton team here on any components of the shoe, anything about the design, the philosophy, anything like that?
David, do you have any?
You pretty much covered it. My question was actually going to be about that XPS diffusion plate and how it's, you know, gender fluid and how it interacts with the action-reaction technology. Because how Matt said earlier, the word piston was perfect. That's exactly how I would describe it. That Newtonian kind of landing. It's plush enough and protective enough, but it's also responsive and gets you up onto those lugs. And then those lugs really. You have a fast, smooth toe off coming off of it, almost like similar to a toe spring, and you can almost feel it where it's like a piston, where it's like boom, boom. And so, I mean, that was where my questions were going to go down, but they were all answered. So thank you.
Great. Matt, any others for?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Laura. No, you go.
One thing on that extended plate being gender specific.
Yeah.
In the men's shoes, it's 3 millimeters for the thickness, but for the women's shoes, we made it 2 millimeters. So that's another component of that shoe that is female specific versus just going with a stock plate for all shoes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you guys know, or I don't know how much you can or can't say about it, I guess, but is that, what's the component? What is that plate made out of?
It's elastic, similar to a TPU.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely, something that we add. We'll try a lot of different variations to dial it in, because the resiliency within and other factors within that spectrum are enormous. You can get a really hard one, you can get a really soft one, so we have to really fine tune it. From both a thickness as well as other sort of measures of how much it's going to flex and things like that to add in. But yeah, it's a combination of TPU and a little bit of extra magic.
Yeah, the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I have one more question for everybody that everyone gets to answer. I'm putting everybody on the spot. And then we'll transition. We'll give you guys one more chance if there's anything else that you all want to share about the Fate 6 or about Newton. That'll be your chance to do that. But first, on every episode, we do the question, if this shoe were a blank, what would it be and why? And so for the Fate 6, we're going to do, if this shoe were a state in the United States, which state would it be and why? So I don't know who wants to go first. We have 6 of us.
I'll go first. I'll just pick Colorado, right?
I knew that was coming.
I picked the easy one. So, and only because Colorado is known for running, for activity, for people. I mean, I tell a story that I thought I was fast one day, and I saw this lady coming behind me. I thought I'm just going to pick up my speed and stay ahead of her. And within a half a mile, she blew right by me. And I said, okay, I'm in Boulder. There's always somebody better.
Yeah. Let me see. I would probably go with, probably a state like California, just purely because it has lovely mountain ranges as well as beautiful oceans. A little bit of everything kind of sits in that shoe. It's I sort of view it as the jack of all trades within the line. It's the easiest to put people into and stuff. So for the versatility, I'd probably have to go with California.
David and Matt like that one. They're like, thank you.
You guys aren't the only ones with a sports rivalry.
Uh-oh.
I'm from Nebraska.
Oh,
And Nebraska and CU, the college football teams, have always been big rivals. So I think I'm going to have to go with Nebraska because it's the best. But also, in all seriousness, I think for the amount of work that went into making this women's specific shoe, and I mean, it was years in that sense, and just the fit we have for women's foot, I think it's the best work we've done in a lot of regards. So I'd just call it Nebraska.
Like it.
That's why it's red, right?
Yeah.
And, I didn't want to state the obvious, Jerry, but I think that's why we did that.
red.
For the Badgers. I went to Wisconsin, so I have a little
Good.
Big Ten rivalry there. I'll go next because I have my answer. I'm going to kind of cheat. I'm going to say Oregon, but particularly Portland. Hey, this is for you. I guess this is for you, Matt, too. You're from Portland, right?
I'm from Portland, Oregon.
But what is it that keep Portland weird? Is that like their phrase?
Yes.
Not that this shoe is weird, but I think Newton brings something very unique to the running shoe industry. There isn't anything even close to what this shoe looks like or feels like under your foot. So I'll go with weird in a good way, right? You like Portland, Matt. So it's good. So yeah, the uniqueness for me.
So I think I might cheat a little bit. Oh,
Go.
okay.
Let's go
I
left.
might cheat a little bit. So I'm going to go down the lane of kind of having a city within a state, kind of like how Nathan did. So I loved how Matt was talking about California because it's like a little bit of a jack of all trades, having a little bit of everything in it. But one thing that I do really appreciate with this shoe and with Newton as a company is the amount of innovation and the amount of engineering that goes into this. So when I think of this, I think of almost like the Silicon Valley of California, where you have the big engineering boom, and all these crazy thoughts that seem weird at the time, but end up working. and creating something that's really beautiful and awesome. So I'm going to go with the Silicon Valley.
Matt, close us out here with it.
I'm going to have to go with Jerry on this one. I've only been to Colorado once with a layover, and I was lucky enough to stay a night. But that was a very fun part of a trip where I went out for a run, and same experience, had an incredible number of runners out there, even at like 4:30 in the morning, blow by me. And it was and they were nice enough to come back around and like have me join them. So it was super fun. I really want to go back. Colorado has a very vibrant community, and it's very unique. It's interesting. And I feel like it's similar to the shoe, where you really have to go there to experience that. And if you haven't been to Colorado, you should. And also it's the same thing where this shoe isn't as beautiful as it looks, right? As beautiful as all these colorways are, right? That's not just there for looks, right? There is a really big focus on thinking about what you're putting on your feet, right? There's a thought about going, what is your health like? What are your biomechanics like? And that's from what the vibe I got in Colorado. There's a huge focus on fitness, right? That's why routinely Colorado cities are the most fit in the United States. And I think I have to agree with Jerry that really reminds me of Colorado, and I'm excited to go back at some point.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So before this will be kind of the first half is the interview with you guys, and then we'll take a break from the recording. We'll come back and we'll finish up just with three of us kind of going through our experience. But before we finish this part here, do any of you three have anything else you want to say about the Fate 6, about Newton in general? This is kind of the platform for you.
Well, the one thing I will say, if you think we've done something now, wait till you see what we come out in February with. We're going to shake the whole running world up with what we're doing. And it's exciting. And I think it's when you hear about it, you're gonna say, "Wow, these guys really are at that point of this spear leading the way."
Oh boy, now I'm excited.
When
Newton dropping the bomb.
Yeah, when Newton first came out, I was so impressed, because you guys were so time where the whole focus was on the rear foot. And while the rear foot's important, you can't forget about the front half of the shoe. And we'll talk about this later, and I'm excited to review this, but especially when I talk about stability of the foot, everybody seems to forget the forefoot, right? In terms of, though, that first MTP joint, the metatarsal joint, also needs to be stabilized in a lot of people, right? And they miss that. And so you guys have already shaken things up, so I'm very excited to see how that goes. Although I would love to see a rebirth of the MP2. I don't know if that's possible, but
You never know.
okay, I'll keep an open mind.
Anything else from Laura or Matt here?
No, I think that summed it up quite well.
Great.
Yeah. And just in terms of the stability that Matt was speaking to in his shoe, that was another thing we found in some of our third-party testing a few years ago. Was we tested even our neutral models up against some of the most stable models on the shoe wall, and our findings were that we make one of the most stable shoes, and that was before we even went back to posting shoes. But when people are landing more on their forefoot, the ankle attenuation, I guess, results in it's less dramatic in a Newton versus a lot of those stability models. So what he was mentioning, that's not lost on us. That was definitely an intention.
That does not surprise me at all to hear that. Yes.
Fabulous. Well,
cool to have a
go
shoe.
ahead, Matt.
Sorry, love talking. It's cool to have a shoe, and for those of the readers who know that I talk about stability a lot, and that stability does not just come from posting, although I have to say walking around in these is in the distance and the Kismet is awesome, but there are many other ways to stabilize the foot. And I really, again, think you guys are awesome for going outside of the box, going, how else can we do this beyond just stabilizing the arch? And I think this does a really good job of this. To be honest with you guys, clinically, I actually use Newton shoes as a tool, especially for, and this is going to sound counterintuitive to a lot of people, but I use them for patients who have a lot of stiffness in that first toe joint. That if they haven't lost it completely, Most people are very afraid to put people in shoes like this that don't have a lot of toe spring, that have a pivot point. They're like, oh my gosh, like, isn't that going to hurt? What I have found clinically is it actually ends up unloading that joint and actually helps get them back to, as we start working on getting that extension back of that joint, really helps them learn how to pivot over the forefoot, because most people will avoid that. And that's, anecdotally, we don't have specific research on cause and effect yet, although most clinicians and most people who've experienced this can tell you what's happened. But to really get people to start using the windlass mechanism of the foot to start pivoting and using that big toe. So I do actually use Newtons as a very specific tool, and it works very well for a large portion of the population. So the whole stability thing, the facilitating motion is absolutely awesome. And I hope you guys do a great job of that. I'm pouring praise on you guys the whole time.
Well, we're so thankful that you guys gave up some of it. We're filming on a Sunday night. So we thank you that you guys gave up time to join us, have this conversation. And we look forward to continuing to learn about what you guys are doing at Newton and helping other people know about it as well. So we appreciate your time. We will take a quick break here, and when we come back, David, Matt, and I will break down our training and testing experience of the Fate 6.
Okay, it sounds good. Thank you. And Matthew, if I can just add one thing, we learned a long time ago that MS patients walk and ran better in our shoes, and we have lots of testimonies to that regard. We could not get the MS Society to test our shoes. They want a lot of money. So if you know anybody that does that type of thing, we'd love to send them shoes and see if that really is the case. But we have people telling us it is.
I have some amazing mentors of mine who would probably love that opportunity. So I will definitely reach out to them, because there's a large population of individuals here in Southern California with MS, and there's some very, very, very good physical therapists and clinicians down here who work with those people. So I would love to make that connection. So I will reach out immediately.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. Well, thanks, guys. Enjoy your Newtons.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So much.
All right, everybody. We are back to the Dr. Zoning Virtual Roundtable. We are continuing to talk about the Newton Fate 6, and now David, Matt, and I are just going to break down our testing experience in the shoe and running through our review. So let's get started. Let's just talk about the fit of this shoe and the upper. What did you guys think about it? Again, it's an engineered air mesh that you can see it has a couple layers and some overlays. It's got a sweet reflective multicolored Newton logo, and then the tongue is also reflective, which makes it look more pink in the sun than red, but still nice. But anyway, what do you guys think about the fit?
On the upper, if you wear these, everybody will comment positively. David and all of us have been wearing this shoe in clinic just to get our muscles used to it before we ran in it. I don't think I've had a single patient not comment on the color, and that means
it's crazy
too. Which also concerns me for a couple of my patients, because I'm worried the dimension's getting a little worse. I think they forgot that I've worn it previously, but that's off topic. The fit is great. With the action reaction stuff, they've got a good amount of room in the toe box. I didn't have to lace lock this at all. There's a good amount of room in here, but I didn't need to lock it down. Even at speed, it felt really good. There is a heel counter back here. It didn't bother me at all. It was awesome. I was the what is this called?
The taper.
Thank you. We do this live. The front of the shoe does taper a little bit, and I felt that initially with the first couple of steps, but then it's gone away. And nice solid wide toe box. It's great. I really like the fit, and nice and airy for Southern California.
Very. Yeah, I took this for runs in pretty hot weather, and it was just fine. Like, no humid, no sweating in terms of like having it get wet on me, nothing crazy. So I was actually a big fan of that. And I felt like it locked down pretty dang well through that midfoot. It's reinforced pretty well through that midfoot as well as it comes up. So when you lace it down, it almost pulls up and in. So that's also a nice touch there. I agree with everything that Matt said. I didn't have to heel lock my shoe at all, and the upper is very breathable. It does have a little bit of give to it. Like the one place I noticed I had a little bit of hard time with was in like sharp turns. But besides that, I mean, it's a pretty spot on upper. When I was first looking at it from the outside looking in, I thought I might have to tighten it down or do something with it because it all kind of looked relatively spacious. But it did a great job of locking down and having enough room in that forefoot region to just have enough toe splay but not be overly spacious in any way possible. So I was super happy, and it also makes me want to wear red polos. So
Your Tiger Sundays. I agree with you guys. For me there was two highlights of the shoe for me, and one of them was the upper. I mean, if you look at it and if you were holding it, it looks very traditional. Like it's not I don't know. It's not trying to look like anything extremely special. It's got the layered mesh, and then if you're not on podcast, you can't see what I'm pointing at. But these overlays are almost like a rubber, which you don't feel at all. It's not like they impinge on the foot, but they do secure it really well. So my lacing was easy, no issues at all, and really breathable. I thought it was a great fit. I think roomy enough for people with a little bit wider foot. Because the toe box has some of that stretchiness and give to it without sacrificing lockdown through the midfoot. All right. I think this is the big part about this shoe. What do you guys think about the ride? With the Newton team, we talked about some of the technologies in here. How did it feel like it performed for you? What was it like transitioning to it, that kind of stuff?
I can go. Yeah, I liked it. I know I'm not as prominent as a heel striker as you two, but I still really did appreciate the Newtonian heel. And now that we've got confirmation it's some kind of a TPU complex, compound.
ETP. Yeah.
ETP.
ETPU.
Oh, ETPU. My bad. I must have misheard it. But it's actually really nice. It's like a plush, relatively cushioned landing, protective, but also responsive, and it gets you up on those legs. And it's pretty dang smooth. It almost looks like it won't be, but you land and you come through, and then next thing you know, you're on here, and then you just have that quick little fall toe off. And it's really smooth, really fluid. I liked it a lot. I was concerned initially that it might feel too aggressive, but it doesn't. It does feel a little bit more aggressive than a traditional trainer, but I think some degree of that is expected. But for being a 4.5 millimeter drop and having those forefoot legs, it's pretty dang smooth. And I almost found that the harder I smashed those legs, it almost felt better. I don't know.
That's the reaction, right? That's the whole.
Yeah, the action reaction.
We didn't even bring this up. That's Newton's third law, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, Newton's third law. They did a good job of marketing there. That's good. I'm a very prominent heel striker, hopefully without overstriding. But yeah, pretty prominent heel striker. And I definitely needed to transition to this. I couldn't do what David did and take it out for 10 miles. I took it out for 1.5 miles on my first run in them. And even after that, my calves told me that I had just run in a different kind of a shoe. I think, like they talked about with the drop, I was curious about that because it's listed as a 4.5 millimeter. So, I'm used to running in things like the Skechers Razor 3 and some other 4 millimeter drops. However, these have the lugs in the front, which actually add a little bit of static stack to the forefoot. And so it feels almost more like a zero drop shoe. So I needed to transition. At the same time, I think that the fact that I really could feel the Newtonian foam in the heel. I was very surprised with how little is underfoot, how cushioned it was. Definitely still a firm shoe. It's not like you're running on something like a pillow, but it's more cushioned in the heel than I thought, and I didn't feel like it was jarring. It absorbed it pretty well. And even, I thought I would kind of, as I was rolling through, as you get to the forefoot, because I'm landing so far back, I thought it would be a little bit of a catch in the stride. And you can feel the lugs for the first little bit, but it was nice to learn a little bit about how many different compounds are interacting in there, that there's 11 different layers, 11 to 13. And I think that did help smooth out that transition. The lugs are there, but it's not abrasive during the transition, I would say.
Definitely agree with all that. I think, I like the lugs. The Newtonian heel was actually a favorite of mine as a fellow heel striker. We for those interested, take a look at our either our podcast or our YouTube review of foot strike, where we talked about kind of the differences between that. As one's not necessarily better than the other one, but I was really impressed with how smooth the heel was. As the Newtonian, the ETP, you can definitely feel it, and it's got some bounce to it. So I was like, this might be a rough ride landing back here, but no, it was great. Like Nathan, I definitely took some time to get used to these. So we test a variety of shoes at a variety of heel offsets. And as we always talk about, right, one of the biggest risk factors for injury is a sudden change, a change that's too fast and too abrupt. So with lower drop shoes or even higher drop when I'm going back and forth, I will break them in walking around in clinic. One
quick shout out to our mini series on the podcast, where I run through the different training errors. A lot of them have to do with a particular study that looked at training errors and which ones are most prominent. A lot of them have to do with sudden changes or that kind of thing. So anyway, keep going.
We'll listen to those. Those are awesome. And I listen to
them.
I do too.
They're 3 minutes long. It's kind of like bullet point info, and then you can move on with your day.
So I definitely spent a lot of days walking around in this first before I even started running in it. And I just even noticed just walking was super smooth. It's definitely I would call it a firmer performance trainer, right? There's cushion there. It's definitely closer to the ground, but a lot of the cushioning is going to be now the Newtonian foam, and then the action reaction, the lugs that will go up into the chamber as you land and then come back, and you can pivot off them. But it's a pretty smooth ride. I was really impressed. I was a little nervous with, again, kind of the lugs will create a little bit lower offset than what's listed, right? Remember, offset is dynamic. But it was pretty smooth. And even like one of the first runs I did in these was this massive uphill run called the Glendora Mountain Road that we have here in Southern California, just straight uphill and then straight downhill. It was smooth going uphill. It was great. And I think Nathan and David also experienced that. I was really surprised. These actually do really well on trails. They have trail-specific shoes, and these you definitely dig in. It's been great.
When we get to stability, let's talk more about trails.
Okay.
Because I'm really excited to talk about that too.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think, David, you mentioned this, maybe you can talk about it, but the kind of the functional, I think you wrote about this in your written review, the functional toe spring that almost happens because of these lugs. Why don't you talk about that in terms of the ride?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look just from the outside looking in, there's not that much of a toe spring. Like, it's not really that heavily built in. However, with the lugs, that action-reaction technology, when you load it, it suppresses in, kind of springs back off, and you're going into that toe off. Even the lugs are tapered slightly. So I'm trying to see if I can get it on my camera just right there. But like right through here, it tapers down into the rest of that toe off and forefoot region. And so it's not just like lug toe off. It's a fluid lug into toe off, and it feels very much like a toe spring. And I think when I had said in my written review, it almost feels like a cross-country spike that is a daily trainer. And it was kind of mind-blowing to me, because it's like, it feels aggressive enough, but it doesn't feel so aggressive that you have to just hammer away on it. But at the same time, it's responsive, but it's also just a nice, smooth, fluid build. It's nothing overly crazy. So I was happy about that, and I felt like I had a quick, fast toe off and cadence when running in them, without really even trying to. So I was happy about that.
All right, let's transition into stability, and I'm going to go first because I'm excited. When I think the stability magic of this shoe happens in the forefoot, and they talked about this, but they used to have all of these lugs detached, but now you can see this whole rubber area, and if you can't see it, there's like a rubber part throughout the forefoot that attaches all the lugs together and kind of looks like a little webbing that stretches down to the midfoot from the forefoot. I took these out on some trails, and I took them on gravel roads with really good sized inch and a half, 2-inch rocks. And I would run straight over rocks without avoiding them, and I wouldn't feel it. The mobility, there's a great balance of mobility in these lugs, protection from the lugs that almost act like this rock plate, almost. And the fact that they can move independently but are still connected allowed it to, I didn't even feel the rocks under my foot, which was awesome. And then I would take them on some single track, and I didn't have any issues through the forefoot. So I think that the balance of this, the stability, the flexibility, and the way that they're now connected instead of just being completely independent really creates a stable platform. Plus this, if you can see, there's that, they called it the membrane, this red section here through the forefoot. That's also firmer than the foam compound that surrounds it. So you have a firm membrane that's spanning medial to lateral in the forefoot, and you have a good amount of flexibility within the forefoot as well without sacrificing too much flexibility to make it unstable. I appreciated it from that standpoint. Other than that, it's certainly a neutral shoe. The heel and the midfoot were still a little bit more narrow, a little bit more narrow of a heel, a little bit more narrow of a midfoot, but the forefoot's extremely stable. All right, I'm done.
Yeah. I'll jump on as the stability. I can always call myself I'm the stability guy. I'm the heel, whatever. The destroyer. I need to stop giving myself nicknames. That's not cool. That's a huge shark move. You guys David gave you the destroyer. Okay, so that one.
Yeah, actually, to be fair, when did I give you that? I gave you that a long time ago.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't even know if we were.
We'll go into durability in a second, which is but. From a stability standpoint, there is a plate in here, and it is also a TPU plate that they utilize kind of about from here on back, and it does provide a good amount of stability in the forefoot. And what if you listen to the other the interview with the guys from Newton, the guys and gals, is that they have found that through third-party testing that their neutral shoes actually stack up to some of the stability shoes in terms of like creating stable rise. There's no arch support in this whatsoever, right? But just the way the lugs are set up in terms of creating a really nice wide base in the forefoot, the plates combined with the fact that these don't just compress, they really help pivot you off the front of the foot, does create a lot of great stability forward. So this is a great option for those who maybe are looking for a little more stable ride but don't need arch support and maybe toe off a little bit more. The Newton's a great option, especially the Fate. I should also note that the Fate, 6 years ago when the first version came out, the Fate and the Kismet, which we'll also review, these were the first ones to have a 5-lug configuration because it used to be 4 lugs. And it definitely changed the stability a lot, positively.
Yeah. David, you got anything to add on stability?
Yeah, I mean, I actually did. There's a virtual trail race series going around in my neighborhood. And I did a trail time trial in these. So I needed to have the mileage for the testing. So I opted to not actually wear a trail shoe for a trail time trial. But I actually did okay. The only time that I had problems, like I said earlier, was maybe sharp turns, and then if the ground is really uneven, then maybe that upper has a little bit of stretch, or I felt a little bit of movement, but it's not meant to be a trail shoe. So that's not really a negative mark. I'm taking it in conditions it shouldn't be in. So, but overall, yeah, it's very, very stable. I mean, that forefoot is unbelievably stable. It's crazy. How you were saying earlier, Nathan, I could just run on rocks. I felt comfortable just slamming that foot into the rocks with no hesitation, and it was just fine. Yeah. It doesn't really translate. It's flexible just enough to have a fluid ride and toe off, but it's not so flexible that you put it under varying stress in different terrains and whatnot, to where the stability goes away. It's stable enough. It almost operates like a light stability shoe rather than a true neutral shoe.
For the forefoot.
Neutral shoe. Well, what's that?
For the forefoot.
For the forefoot, yes. Yeah, for the forefoot. to be fair. The heel and the midfoot, very much neutral. It's all up front here where that kind of stability kicks in. But yeah, I was very happy with the stability, and I felt very stable too. Uphill, downhill, everything felt fine. So
Awesome. What do you guys think about durability? How are yours holding up?
I have 50 miles in my pair, and there's almost nowhere.
How much do you have on?
A little over 50 miles in these.
Okay. Nowhere. For you.
For me,
That's insane.
it is.
yeah. I mean,
I've said
mine's
that-
brand new. I think I have 40, and it's like nothing. Just some like very, very mild abrasion, like right there, which is not concerning at all in the slightest. So very durable.
Yeah, and I guess we should say this too. For me, durability looks great. You know, there's some exposed foam here through the midfoot. It's kind of like a split. It's full contact, but it's a split rubber. Yours looks so much better than mine. My foam is a little bit beat up, but I would expect that for an exposed
Yeah, I don't
foam.
know how. I took this through trails. I think this has 20 trail miles, and it still looks fine.
Wow.
I have zero idea. Like, I thought it looked dusty or something, but then I hold it and I'm like, no, it actually looks brand new. I don't know.
Newton does have have trail specific models, by the way. We have not tested them yet, but for those,
Yeah, and I would love to. I think the Boko, I believe, is the new one that came out.
Yep. Awesome. What about anything else? Do you guys have any other last nuggets, areas for improvement, things that didn't stack up as well as you were hoping, or any additional thoughts?
I think from this is their transitional shoe. So something like the Distance series, right? So this is one of the more traditional ones. So this is the Distance S. This is their lightweight stability model. It's a super fun shoe. The lugs are more aggressive. There's only a 2 millimeter drop on this. So when I was stepping in this, it felt like a negative drop, but you get used to it. This is much more aggressive. This is one of the transitional models. I think that they might be better to have the shoe just be a little bit more. I like it. It might be better for those looking to transition to Newton to have just a little bit more sole underneath there. Like, this feels like a lightweight performance trainer, and I love it. But I'm very biased because that's my favorite kind of shoe. For a lot of runners, it may be beneficial to have a little bit more stack height, a little bit more drop, just to help people ease in a little bit. But that maybe need to create a whole nother shoe, because I really don't want them to get rid of this one, because this is great. I like it. Just know that you need to take time to transition into this shoe. It is different. Unless you're used to low, like super low drop shoes, you need to make sure you transition into this stuff. Because even though it might not change your foot strike, it's definitely going to change what muscles you might be utilizing in terms of what percentage. So that change, you ease into it. That's my big thing. My other comment is I'm very impressed, again, that they really create like David said earlier, they create a really nice pivot and toe off, despite the fact they don't have that much toe spring. I would argue this toe off feels better than a lot of the recent models coming out that have maximal mounts and even use like a carbon fiber plate. Like this, it feels pretty smooth. It feels pretty good. And I really like the concept. Again, there's a really nice flex groove here to help facilitate, pivoting off and getting extension of the MTP, or metatarsal phalangeal joints, which in English means the big toe joints here. That extension is really important. Don't lose that. People need at least like 60 degrees for
60 for walking.
Walking, right? For running, it's like 80, 90, if I remember correctly, like at minimum, right? So you can get away with that if you don't have it with some toe spring, but don't lose that. And this is the kind of shoe that definitely seems to help pivot and utilize that a little bit better. So and that's one of the things that makes it more stable. So I really like that. For people with really bad forefoot issues, I don't know, unless you go see a rehab specialist, physical therapist, in terms of trying to facilitate in the right direction. This is a little more aggressive ride, so you do need to be aware of that. So
yeah, I think, for me, just a general comment, like, I know this shoe is built to be one that can take you longer. And I did really like the Newtonian heel. still firmer. And for me, this is a subjective thing. This is not, this is not across the board. For me, this won't be a shoe that I would take more than, a 10-mile run. But that, again, even though I have a lot of testing in on this, I would say I'm still transitioning to it. I think that process for some people can take 4 to 6 months to be able to actually transition to something. So, I'd say if you're transitioning, yes, this is a transition shoe, but it is still a big transition that's going to take time. And I hate to give this recommendation to Newton, just to say like, hey, I think this is the right idea. This is just an idea. And it's the same one that Matt said, and I was thinking about this. I don't know if we talked about it yesterday or not, but just the idea of adding just a little bit more underneath. I don't know exactly what that would look like for them, just and not changing the ratio of anything, but I know that stack height changes more than just how much is underfoot. There's a lot more geometry that needs to change and all that. But I think to have something as their transition shoe that would add a little bit of cushion underneath, make it just a little bit softer, wouldn't be a bad thing. I think that it would still serve the same purpose. It could be even more of a trainer because this, even though, what is it, 9.2, I believe, 9.2 ounces. I have it on here. Let's double check. Yep, 9.2 ounces. That's still not too heavy, and you have some leeway, I think, there, to keep it as a nice trainer that could still function a little bit as a performance trainer. So I think that's my big thought in terms of potential changes, recommendations.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think, I don't know if so much stacks the issue because that heel is really well cushioned. I think it'd be really interesting if there's already 13 levels of stuff going on, potentially even maybe having a real small layer of Newtonium just lining underneath wherever that plate and underneath the lugs, somewhere in between, because that might even add a little bit of bounce and cushion as well and kind of soften that firm ride a little bit. It's by no means too firm. I think it's protective and it's still it's not hard, but I do think it could be softened slightly up in that region. That might take away from the stability. I don't know. But I think that might be a good thing to look into, that or add a little bit of stack, one of the two. I think both would kind of get it done.
Yeah. Well, great. Any other last thoughts?
One of the things that we forgot to mention on fit is that the Fate is one of the first shoes that they're doing men's and women's specific lasts on. So all of us obviously have the men's version. The women's version is actually designed differently. Both the shape as well as the plate in here, the lugs, a lot of the layers have been developed very specifically for a woman's foot. And I've hammered on this beforehand, but men and women have different feet. They have different biomechanics, and that needs to be acknowledged by the running shoe industry. Most of the running shoe industry still does not make separate men's and women's lasts. Most of them are actually men's lasts or shapes, and they just do what's called shrink it and pink it, where women, a lot of the shoes you guys are getting, gals, are basically the men's shoes that they just made smaller and added pink colors to. So Newton went the extra mile, literally beyond that, to make different shapes and different setups for the each gender with the Fate. So that's awesome. So know that you're gonna have a different ride depending on which one you get. And kudos to them, because again, I just had experience talking with some people. It is very expensive to create a different last for a shoe, right? So when the development process and they're building new things, it's like at least $7+ grand. And that's not just men's and women's. That's like, hey, if we tweak something and create a new last because we changed something else, that's over $7 grand per shoe. And it's like, oh my gosh. So good on you guys. I know it's expensive with it.
Awesome. Well, there are our thoughts on the art and science about putting the Newton Fate 6 on your feet. Again, thank you to the Newton team for coming on with us and giving us some insight into some of the secret sauces that go into making the shoe and the philosophy behind it. It's great to hear from the people who are dedicating their lives to this stuff. So we are really appreciative of having you on here. Hope you all enjoyed this. And again, if you want to support what we're doing, you can, again, just continue to follow us on our social media platforms. You can check out our podcast, which is called the Doctors of Running Virtual Roundtable. You can subscribe to that or the YouTube channel as well. And check out our website at doctorsofrunning.com. We have lots of shoe reviews, conversations on rehabilitation and biomechanics. And this little blurb keeps getting longer because we keep adding more stuff. So anyway, thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.